In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about some basic trigonometry. Now, trigonometry is the study of triangles, right triangles specifically. Got our right angle here. And it's all about the relationship of the angles to the sides of the triangle. Now, one way that mathematicians talk about these angle relationships is by using the sine functions, the cosine functions, and the tangent functions. And each one has their own relationship to the angle and the sides. Like the sine of an angle, which I'm going to use theta, is the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. The cosine of an angle is the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. And the tangent of an angle is the opposite divided by the adjacent. Now, what is the opposite, what is the adjacent, and what is the hypotenuse? Good questions. Let's say that we are dealing with this angle down here. That's our angle. The hypotenuse never changes. The hypotenuse is always opposite the right angle. It is the longest side of our triangle. So if I have my right angle over here, this part is going to be the hypotenuse. Okay? And then I just need to figure out the opposite and the adjacent. Well, from the angle, if we pretend we are an archer and we are shooting an arrow, we are going across to the opposite side of the triangle. So this is the opposite side. It is always directly across the full triangle from the angle we are working on. And then the only one that's left is down here, the side that helps create the angle besides the hypotenuse. So this is the adjacent side. Now, if let's say we took a different angle. Let's say instead of this angle down here, I'll recreate this triangle real quick. Okay, 3, 4, and 5. There's my right angle. Let's say this time we were trying to use that angle up there. There's my theta. Well, like I said, the hypotenuse is always across from the right angle, and it is the longest side, so that doesn't change. There's my hypotenuse here. This time, if I'm shooting an arrow across the triangle, the 3 is my opposite side. And now the only one left must be the adjacent, so there it is. So we have the sine of an angle is the opposite divided by the hypotenuse, the cosine of an angle is the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse, and the tangent of an angle is the opposite divided by the adjacent. Now, how can we remember these three relationships? Well, we have a little word, pretty much kind of a made-up word, but it works. It is SOHCAHTOA. S-O over H. C, A over H, T, O over A. And this is all of the relationships that we have right here. Sine is opposite over the hypotenuse, cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. Once we remember that and have that in our memory, we can use it to find what the relationships of our angles and our sides are. So, I'm going to erase what these are over here because now I have these over here. And with this triangle, let's find the sine. So I'm going to erase this. Alright, so I'm working on this angle down here. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Well, my opposite side is 4. My hypotenuse is 5, so my sine of this angle is 4/5. That's all there is to it. My cosine is adjacent over the hypotenuse. My adjacent is 3, my hypotenuse is 5 again, so my cosine is 3/5. And then lastly, the tangent. Our tangent is opposite over adjacent. So we go to our opposite side, which is 4, our adjacent side, which is 3. So the tangent of this triangle is 4/3. And there we have it. We have found the 3 basic trig functions. Okay? Why don't we try another triangle real quick? Alright, so here's our new triangle. And this time we have the angle up here. But we're still looking for the same 3 trig functions. We want the sine of our angle, the cosine of our angle, and the tangent of our angle. Well, if we remember what SOHCAHTOA stands for, we can put it all together. So what was the sine again? Hopefully you say to yourself, it's the opposite over the hypotenuse. What's the cosine? It's the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And then what is the tangent? It is the opposite over the adjacent. So there is our SOHCAHTOA. We have our angle up here, so now we just got to decide which side is the opposite, which side is the adjacent, and we can get our 3 trig functions. So, the hypotenuse, remember, is always the largest side, and it is across from the right angle, so we can say that 17 is the hypotenuse. And then we've got the angle up here. So if I shoot an arrow from that angle at its opposite side, it turns out that 8 is the opposite side, and then 15 is the adjacent. Now we just put it into play with our SOHCAHTOA, and we call it a day. So the sine is opposite over the hypotenuse, so that is 8 over 17. The cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so that is 15 over 17. And tangent is the opposite over adjacent, so 8 over 15. And there we go. We have found our 3 basic trig functions. The last little thing we're going to talk about is the reciprocal functions, because there are actually a total of 6 trig functions we're going to be worrying about, and we don't have a little phrase for them, because if we know sine, cosine, and tangent, we can very easily find the other 3. They are reciprocals, and if you know the meaning of the word reciprocal, you should know that they're not that hard to find. So the reciprocal function for sine. Sine's reciprocal function is called cosecant, and it is abbreviated CSC. Cosine's reciprocal function is called secant, and it is abbreviated SEC. And tangent's reciprocal function is called cotangent, and it is abbreviated COT. And what's nice about these reciprocal functions is that whatever the sine, cosine, and tangent are, these are the reciprocals. They are flipped. So cosecant is 17 over 8. All I did was take this fraction of what was sine, and I found the reciprocal. Secant is 17 over 15. And cotangent is 15 over 8. And there we have it. We have our 6 trig functions, we have our 3 basics, and our 3 reciprocals. In part 2 of this video, we are going to look at how can we use these sine, cosine, and tangent features, or functions, to solve for missing parts of our triangle. If you enjoyed this, or you found it useful, please tune in to part 2.